In June 2015, the South East Group celebrated its 40th anniversary. 40 years of climbing Brock Hill, 40 years of repairing punctures, and 40 years of enjoying the finest Essex countryside. It's been great fun during that time, and we felt it was worth recording the history of the South East Group since it began. So join me during the next half hour, see what we've been doing over the last 40 years.
We can go back, if you like, to 1883. There was a gentleman called Robert Cook, and Robert Cook was the innovator of getting together cycling clubs and cyclists in Essex, and he organised the Essex County Cycling and Athletic Association. In those days, the roads were awful. Robert rode a penny farthing. He belonged to West Essex Bicycle Club, and they used to meet at the Saracen's Head in Chelmsford. He also organised annual events where there was competitions, and all the top people came there because in those days the only people that could afford to buy bikes were people with money. So you had MPs, JPs, bishops and those sort of people that went to those dues. Robert died in 1908 and he has a grave in Writtle Cemetery, and his epitaph is there, and it's right at the beginning on the left hand side of the entrance.
At some point, road surfaces became much better. They became tarmacked, and so cycling would have been a far safer and a far easier endeavour. What time was that?
Well, I would say probably around about 1900. There was a certain amount of tarmac around. You had a bit in Southend, a bit in Chelmsford, a bit in Wickford.
The Essex CTC, as we know it, it first started in 1927, I believe, but it's looking as if actually there were cycling clubs that existed in some form before then.
CTC started in 1878 in Harrogate. Lots of cycle clubs at that period of time. There were 2 or 3 in Southend. I think there was one at the Kersal. You had a captain, you had a president, etc. They had uniforms, so you had to buy the uniform. In the CTC, they had their own uniforms, but if it wasn't a CTC club, then they had their own designs, their own colours. You had to have a badge, and people had like a schoolboy hat, and the badge was on the front of the schoolboy hat. And if you left the club, you had to give that badge back to the club. Yeah. That's the way people got around, either on the horse, but then the penny farthing came in, and that's how people got around. What happened at the end of that century is that in came the car, in came the motorcycle, and by about 1900, because of those 2 innovative vehicles, the number of cycling clubs diminished because people that had money were now running cars and motorcycles.
Those then that were able to afford new bikes at the time, who have now then moved on to buying motorcycles or cars, was there a second-hand market in bicycles being established?
Oh yes, there was. I mean, the safety cycle came in after the penny farthing. We didn't have mass production then. What happened is that BSA made the parts for bicycles at that period of time up to about 1920. So what would happen is you go to a cycle shop, and the cycle shop would actually make the frame up for you, and he would buy the parts from BSA to finish the bike off.
In my formative years, shall we say, you'd be buying a Raleigh or a Hercules was the other one I was thinking of. And BSA, of course.
Yes.
Made them.
Phillips, I think, made them. Yeah. Phillips was a.
Phillips was another one. Yes. But there were dozens of lightweight individual builders in the country. My first one was actually a McLean.
Oh.
Yeah. Who lived at the Angel in Islington. Oh. But he had a shop in Tottenham, and as I was an Edmonton lad, Tottenham was only just down the road, and McLean's was the shop which was sold lightweight bikes.
Right.
And they were Reynolds 531, of course, at that time, and that was about the only option to the gas barrel, really.
I bought that in 1954, the frame, and built it up from there. After I'd met a cycling colleague from the South End Wheelers who said, if you want to come out cycling, get a real bike. And I realised I was riding a Rayleigh Lenton Sports, and he poo-pooed it. So after that, I got this frame recommended to me and built it up, and it meets muster.
We used to, the Southend section used to do a regular summer ride from Southend to Clacton.
Right.
And that is over 100 miles. In fact, it's about 120, I would think, depending which part of Southend you come from initially. Right. And other places, we would go to Kent, and we'd do sort of 90 miles over there, including the ride to Tilbury and so on. We do 80 and 90 miles, and when we went on holiday, we didn't catch a train anywhere or go by car with the bike on the top. We rode the bike all the way from home to the Lake District in 3 days or something, and then we did a tour around the Lake District, and then 3 days back home again afterwards.
We had a section of the London Cooperative Society, a social club. We had the use of their rooms, and those who were interested in cycling got together, and generally we used to start from April every year. We weren't hard riders through the winter initially, and we used to meet up with the CT section of Southend, and we used to go on joint runs sometimes by accident, going to the same place.
You said that the club used to sing some songs when you were riding along.
Yeah, riding along on the crest of a wave.
Okay. Which is true, which I remember as being a Boy Scout song, actually.
I've got sixpence, jolly jolly sixpence.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was this throughout the whole club run, or was it just occasionally when you got to a pub or something?
No, riding along. Yeah.
Gosh.
This
is something I've
it was
never heard of
It was
before.
glorious. You know, you get all these clubs riding along and, singing. We enjoyed ourselves. Yeah.
Right, okay.
It was the thing, how quickly can we do this? How quickly we do that?
Okay, now, we've got here the club, the London Cooperative Society. What other clubs were around at the time?
There was the Southend Wheelers, there was the Benfleet Wheelers, there was the Pandora Road Club. You had to wear a skirt to join that.
Yeah,
everybody wanted to go and join that one. Eventually, it was unfortunate the CTC Southend closed down.
During the 1960s, interest in cycling dwindled and the Southend section came to an end. Those CTC members that had been riding either rode by themselves or joined other clubs. In June 1975, a group of cyclists met outside Prentice Cycle Shop in Wickford, including Ken and Peggy Thorndike. Their aim was to form a new cyclist touring club section for South East Essex.
The South East group, of course, has sort of filled a hole that was left by the South End section when that folded up. And the South End section was the section I first rode with.
I joined the CTC in 1975. I was persuaded by my father, who introduced me to youth hosteling, and it was in the YHA magazine that I saw an advert for the CTC, and in particular a slideshow that was being advertised at the South East Group Club Run in Snakes Lane. I joined the CTC in 1975. I actually went to the slideshow the same year, and then came out on my first club run in February 1976.
Right.
So that was my inauguration. So it was, fairly near the start of the.
Okay. And can you remember who the first people were that you met and the first ride that you went on?
I can actually, yes. I was met by Ken, Peggy, Dave, and Alison Thorndike.
Oh, the whole family.
At the end of my road, on the Eastwood Road, and they escorted me to start at Prentice's Cycle Shop at Wickford. Right. And I can remember I did the ride just to 11s, which was at the Little Chef at Widford.
Okay.
And I actually remember writing in my diary that day, how we went up Brock Hill, which was my first experience of Brock Hill, and how I wrote in the diary that actually it wasn't really a hill, it was more of a series of hills.
Yes. Oh, I still think of it right now.
And I struggled up it, and I was, I was very young at the time, and I was extremely tired by the time
And
I
how
got
many
home.
were there on that first ride, just to give, the first ride that you were on?
I would say we had about 12 to 15. I can remember one or two of the other people that were out. I remember Trevor McCarthy and his father. They lived in Wickford, and I rode back with them. Tony Crocker was out. People like Phil Humphreys and Dave Seaton, I believe, were there, and Malcolm State Police.
And I remember from the early days, you actually were quite an expert at going to youth hostels. You said that that was your introduction to the CTC.
Well, yes, that's right. We used. I think when the South East Group was formed, one of the aims was obviously touring, and the most sort of cost-effective way of doing that was by using youth hostels. And we set up to have. The idea was to have what you called a hostel weekend once a month. Oh. And I think in the early years we did manage to do that, and then we had sort of mini tours at bank holidays as well, and all sorts of places that we went to, and as you say, some of them no longer there. Places obviously like Castle Hedingham, Blacksall.
Yes.
Blacksall Youth Hostel I think is still there.
It is.
Some of them are very basic. Tanner's Hatch, for example.
Yes.
On the North Downs was very basic. I don't think at the time actually had electricity supply. It had little gas lamps in the dormitories.
Right.
I seem to remember. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, you always had to do a duty.
Absolutely.
Which is somewhat different from these days.
I remember a few of those. Sweeping them out, cleaning the kitchen,
yes.
kind of making sure the dormitories were tidy. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And as we were always the last to leave in the mornings, the South East Group always got the members' kitchen as the duty and had to clear up everybody else's mess.
We ride, and we never, hopefully, leave anybody behind, whether it be a puncher or somebody having to walk up a hill. We ride as a social group, which means we can ride along chatting, changing cycling partners as we go. We stop for 11s, and we also have a pub lunch. Some go back, obviously. And we also have a Threeses cafe stop on the way home. So we're very sociable.
John, if anybody wanted to join the South East Group, there are probably one or two pointers that you should give them. For example, anything about the bikes, for example, they should be well maintained, really.
Well maintained, brakes working, tyres pumped up, carry a puncture repair kit.
Absolutely.
And if you need lights in the winter, lights that work.
Yeah. Bring some money with you as well.
Bring some money for food and drink.
Refreshments, absolutely.
If your saddle's not at the right height, we generally advise you as to
absolutely
raise it or lower it.
Yeah.
Generally, somebody will check the bikes over.
Yeah, so they should probably have mud guards on their bikes.
Have mud guards, yeah. But we don't force mud guards until they've been riding for at least 3 weeks.
Absolutely.
And also they should join the Cyclist Touring Club once they've ridden with us for 3 or 4 weeks, if they're going to come out with us regular, because otherwise we've all got insurance, they haven't.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think it's fair to say that although kind of initially they might find it kind of slightly hard going because they might not be used to the distance that we do, they will do after a few weeks of consistent riding. They will become as well practiced, and their stamina will naturally improve.
Yes. They get used to going distances and the hills.
Absolutely.
I mean, if somebody struggles up a hill, then we obviously wait for them at the top.
Yes, indeed.
We make sure that we have a rule within the CTC that going up a hill you break what we call formation, going down a hill you break formation.
Yes.
But when you're on the level, you ride behind the runners leader, because he can. If you go ahead, he can turn off and lose you.
Absolutely. And we do keep to the country lanes as far as we possibly can. Yep. In practice, we use country lanes that a lot of people probably don't even know exist.
Yes.
And so they tend to be not traffic free, but kind of there's far less traffic on them than you would get on the main roads.
They can be very quiet. Sometimes you could ride down a country lane and not see our vehicle at all unless it's on somebody's drive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, very much so. And also, kind of, there are occasions when we can get off the roads altogether and use bridleways,
Bridleways
cut
or
through
farm
kind of
tracks.
farm tracks, and there are plenty of those as well. So, really, we don't go at any speed, and we kind of get the greatest pleasure out of actually kind of, that's why we call it the Cyclist Touring Club, because we kind of we do the touring.
And we have a good banter between the members. There's always somebody not necessarily taking the mickey, but teasing somebody or winding somebody up, and it's all meant in fun.
It was the social aspect which, for me, was why I went cycling. I can remember, talking to some of the early members, Peggy and Ken Thorndike, and I remember we would ride along, and there would be no time limit on what you're doing your ride. We used to, there were many a time when we would arrive back home from a club run after dark, and we would stop off at a pub for a drink on the way home, and it was just a good social time. We always had a laugh. The hostel weekends were particularly good fun. I can remember, we always had trouble getting going, I think, in the mornings. And on one particular occasion, I think this was at Streatley Youth Hostel, we were all arguing about whose turn it was to go and make the tea in the morning. And we were all in the dormitory, struggling to get going. And in those days you had male and female dormitories, of course, and Peggy Thorndike appeared at the door one day with a tray full of teas for everybody, and one of our members, George Welsh, he hadn't actually got up out of bed properly at that point. He was wrapped in his sleeping bag, and he opened the door with a flounce and a "Friends, Romans and countrymen, bring me your tea." And there was Peggy at the door, and it was just one of those sort of hilarious moments, I suppose. Yes. And it was, it was all the sort of fun that we used to have.
One of our members, we'll just call him Ian, we'd been to the Beehive Cafe in Rochford, and we was riding off, heading towards, I think it was the Red Lion in Wakering. And we turned off a Sutton Road, and he wasn't behind us, so we waited. He came flying round the corner, saw the group waiting at the side of the road, applied his disc brakes, and promptly went over the top of the handlebars.
Oh,
and we thought it was so hilarious because he wasn't hurt, but the fact that he hadn't got used to the disc brakes on his bike, and he took it for granted that he would slow down as he would with ordinary brakes on his bike.
There was a certain rivalry between the Essex sections back in the early days of South East Group history. We still have an intersection shield, but I think it was probably more keenly contested back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
We had events at our club night like the table tennis and darts competitions.
Yes.
And I don't know who the kind of the best darts players were at the time.
Well, I can remember they were quite intense, quite rivalrous actually, and we had a lot of young people, I think, in all of the sections in those days, and there was quite a lot of competition. As you mentioned, the table tennis, darts, and we had a gymkhana competition. Yes. That was quite good fun. All of these, were part of an annual competition that South East Group was very keen to win if it could. Yeah. And
there's also the hill climb as well.
Yeah, the hill climb.
The dreaded hill climb.
Yeah.
Which used to use the hill up to...
Well, there was Gallywood Hill.
Gallywood Hill, yes.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that was often used.
Near Vettenden, I think, that we used from time to time as well.
Yeah, Castledon, I think, might have been used.
Yes.
Castledon Hill was used once. They were fun times actually. There was friendly rivalry, but it was quite competitive.
It was in 1986, in fact, when we won virtually wiped the field
Right.
nationally
Right.
at the finals. I think we won first place, won first lady, we won first junior,
Wow.
we won first team, and I think the only thing we didn't come first in was the map reading competition.
I always remember one of the members, Ken Winters, in the table tennis. He was such a solid player at table tennis that he would bet that you couldn't take more than 6 points off of him in a game. And I have to say, I never remember seeing anybody take more than 6 points off of him.
One of the reasons why the South East Group has been so successful over the last 40 years is because we've had such good secretaries. The role of the secretary is vital in keeping the club together. It needs someone who's got a sense of humour, who's willing to do the jobs, and has got a certain organisational flair as well. And I think it's worth listing just some of those secretaries that we've had. So in the early days, it would have been Ken and Peggy Thorndike. Malcolm Stapley was certainly there. Other names that come to mind in no particular order: Chris Regan, George Welch, Phil de Cruz, Martin Risbridger, Doug Jackson. I've even had a stint at being the secretary myself. It's a vitally important role, and we've had some really good secretaries, and I'd like to thank all those secretaries in the past for the work that they've done. And I'm sure most of those secretaries, although they might not still be in the South East Group area now, I'm still sure that they're riding their bike and they'll have fond memories of the South East Group throughout the last 40 years.
At about 3 years old, I was riding a Triang three-wheeler, which was my first experience of riding a fixed wheel.
Okay.
And I eventually went over the handlebars and broke my milk teeth. From then on, I used to ride other school members in my class, their bikes at lunchtime, as I didn't have a bike of my own. And my first bike is one that's just over there, a Leach Marathon. I've had since 1959.
Wow.
And the first day I got it, I went over the handlebars on that and folded up the front wheel and got rather scarred and cut up.
Oh dear.
But since then I've had quite a few other bikes. At the present I've got 5.
We should mention that you don't need 5 though, do you? You could probably
You don't
get away
need
with
5.
riding
You
one.
can
Every
get away
cyclist needs another bike.
You can get away with one bike providing it's a hybrid or a tourer.
Yes.
You don't need 5. I'm just being greedy because I like to have a variation of bikes that I can ride.
The countryside, the beauty of the countryside that we have here in Essex, and I think Essex as a cycling county has got a lot going for it.
Oh, it certainly has. I mean, only this week, I had an hour to spare, so I popped out on the bike and I'm just going around Danby, around the little lanes, and I'm 10 minutes from my home, and it's wonderful. It really is beautiful. And I've been right around the world, as you said, and it's still a lovely place to ride.
The rides vary a bit according to the time of year. So kind of
Yes.
during the winter rides, some of the winter rides are my favourites actually. I don't know about you, but kind of the likes of Great Lees and some of the pubs nearby, just around the Chilford area, are the prettiest places that you'll ever go to.
Yeah. Well, we try to keep going to pretty areas, stroke
Yes,
reasonably old pubs if we can.
absolutely.
But you say some of the best rides are in the winter, but we also get some very good rides in the summer.
We do.
We have the Viking Trail down on the Isle of Thanet, and the Hive to Dungeness, which I think is still a very popular ride because it's flat.
Absolutely.
And
you lead these rides yourself, and kind of it's flat, and it's very picturesque. And the other thing is, you don't lead it at any great speed. So really, another reason for the popularity of this club is because we all keep together, and nobody really need fear about kind of getting lost, because there's always somebody to lead the group.
Yep. And there's also the French rides,
Yes.
which I can remember on more than one occasion of riding them. I've had you and Ian Cable and others say, how do you know where you're going? And it's either because I've ridden them before, and I recognise buildings or landmarks that I know them on the right route.
Absolutely.
And we always eventually get to our calf stop.
Yes, and the
or
French
restaurant.
trips are always good fun, aren't they? Partly because of the canals around the immediate area of Calais. So
And riding on the other side of the road.
riding on the other side of the road, we
Yep.
meet up with a French friend of yours who can actually speak the language. We stop at a cafe lunchtime and we have some good, the best French cuisine that money can buy.
Yep. And plenty of Leffe Blonde.
Leffe Blonde. And of course, it doesn't cost an awful lot either because you manage to get these cheap ferry tickets. So
Yeah,
it's
50p each way on a ferry.
absolutely brilliant. And we all kind of get into the cafe on the ferry. First thing we do when we arrive at Dover, all crowd into the cafe, make sure we're the first there, and we have a traditional English breakfast, don't we? And we kind of
Full
find our
English-
favourite
yep.
cafe. Great fun, those French trips. Everybody should go on one to it just to kind of find out what we get up to.
And on the way home on the ferry, some actually fall asleep.
Some actually fall asleep, and I like watching Tom and Jerry cartoons.
Cycle touring is getting to be more popular now than it has been in the recent past. Not quite so popular as it used to be, maybe, as yet, but I think it'll come.
Just for the record, of all the cycling that you've done, wherever it's been, what has been the one cycle ride? Or one place, one location that you've been that you kind of thought, yeah, this is fantastic, this is worth doing?
Wow, well, yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer. There's been so many. Peru in the Andes was fantastic. I remember one particular day, because I suppose I'm very fond of the mountains, and I do remember one particular day on my around the world trip where we rode up from in Nepal from a place called Hetauda over the Himalayas towards Kathmandu, and it was hard work, but it was so enjoyable. It was 50 miles of climbing, but when we reached the top, we could see a view of the whole of the Himalayas, including Everest.
If you enjoy adventures, then it's worth trying out one of our summer tours. You just don't know what is around the next corner. There's nothing better than kind of going on something completely new, getting a map. Where shall we go tomorrow? What is the scenery going to be like? Where are we going to be able to stay? It's difficult to chart or plot where you're going to end up sometimes, but the fun is often in the getting there. You have to be independent. Sometimes the bikes might break down. Sometimes the weather won't be very good. Certainly punches will be there, and you end up having to kind of climb up some very steep climbs sometimes to get to your destination. On the positive side, of course, is that often the weather is very good. It's not always uphill, plenty of downhill as well. The scenery can be absolutely magnificent. You put it all together, it's a fantastic adventure, and it's all part of your own doing. You build it around and you kind of get other people to kind of come with you, and it's all part of the adventure. And at the end of it all, you've got a collection of photographs. I've been there, I've done it. It was under my own steam, and you sense a feeling of satisfaction from doing it all. This is no Club 1830 holiday. This was a holiday that I've done myself. It was hard work and I enjoyed it.